filmmakers, गणेश मोगे, हांगा जमलेले थोडे पेंटर्स, विद्यार्थी, आजचो इम्पॉर्टंट विषय सुरुवातीकच जो व्हाईस चान्सलरने तुमका ज्या बऱ्याचशा गजाली सांगितल्या, गोकुळदास प्रभूंनी ज्या साहित्याविषयी गजाली सांगितल्या त्या थोड्या दुसऱ्या लँग्वेजीत, व्हेहिक्युलर लँग्वेज ज्याका म्हणतात इंग्रजीत, ॲज अ थॉट आय वुड लाईक टू एक्सप्लेन टू यू. Cinema started extremely late as an art form. It started in last decade of the 19th century, somewhere after 1892. How it started? It started with a moving image, and with the moving image, it started telling stories. Then, after 35 years, such a long gap, sound came. Then came a computer imagery. Then later it came, before that it came color. Then we have a total digital revolution. But the important thing is, in spite of all these changes, sound, digital revolution, I mean whatever technology, new technology which came, the color which came, the basic structure, the basic idiom of cinema remained the same. There was no serious way improvement in the basic structure of the film. Now what was the basic structure of the film? It was basically a movement image or a moving image. Now that we can see as an example, as there are a lot of students here. The early cinema of Charlie Chaplin. The cinema of Charlie Chaplin, as Gokuldas Prabhu was telling, it was a silent cinema. Now that cinema was understood by people from Africa, from Asia, and even the Eskimos, they understood Charlie Chaplin cinema. Now what was the reason? Why everybody understood Charlie Chaplin cinema? Not because of the comic part in it. Everybody understood Charlie Chaplin cinema because Charlie Chaplin cinema was dealing with a larger humanity. What we talk is a generic humanity. Now, this was the extremely important aspect in a language of a cinema. As your Vice Chancellor was telling, the other arts basically, as a young man, what I've seen the other arts, whether you say classical music or a painting, now these are basically aristocratic arts. It was a cinema which first time made it a democratic. In that sense, it was a democratic. It went to the larger audience with a generic humanity. And therefore, one of the grandfather of film criticism, a Frenchman, André Bazin, he equated in the beginning cinema to a novelist. That time, novelist had an honorable existence. It was somewhere in 50s and 60s. He said, a cinemaker, a cine director, he is like a novelist. He had a tremendous impact and he gets a response from the audience. Now, this was the first time it was understood by most of the film critics that cinema has an extremely important capacity to captivate the audience. Now, why it was so? Earlier, they are replacing the words. It was the word of a literature, which had a word of a poetry, word of a novel. It had a capacity to captivate the audience. But that capacity was further improved by cinema, that moving image. Little further, in our recent times, another French philosopher, Deleuze. Deleuze went little further. He said, a film director is a thinker, a philosopher. Now this was an extremely important compliment to the film directors. There are a lot of film directors here. He called them a thinker, and how does he think? he doesn't think with concepts. He thinks with moving image. Now this is an important distinction. He doesn't think with concepts, he thinks with moving image. Now this brings a cinema maker as a thinker, cinemaker as a philosopher. Now this is an important statement. Now this brings me, as there are a lot of students here, cinema is again considered by some of the philosophers as a seventh art. There are 6 other arts. You know what are those arts. Now there are a lot of things which cinema takes from those arts. Again, your Vice Chancellor mentioned that. I'll go to the details of that within 1 minute. What is the most universal thing? The generic humanity, that's what the cinema takes from the other arts. For example, what does cinema takes from painting? Painting, cinema takes the possibility of a beauty of the sensory world. Now that possibility cinema takes from a painting. Cinema never takes the techniques of painting. What does cinema retains from a music? Now cinema takes from a music not the composition of a music, but it takes the possibility of accompanying the visual image by a sound. Now this is an extremely important development in the history of cinema, the sound. The sound which came 35 years in cinema, in the beginning or even now, some of the people, they think that sound in the form of say music or music in the form of a sound is always considered as something as a background which enhances a visual image, but which is not true. Which is absolutely not true. Sound has its own value. In fact, what sound does, there is no inherent kind of harmony between sound and the visual image. And therefore, one of the greatest filmmaker, André Breton, a Frenchman, he said sound and image, these are the strangers, the way I meet Mr. Gokudas Prabhu suppose today. Now these strangers, they meet on the way, but once they become a friend, they go in a lifelong way. What sound does in cinema is transforms the visual image. It's not a background, it transforms that. Sound, for me, sound and music are one and same things. The third thing, what does cinema takes from a theatre? Now what it takes from a theatre is the entire process by which the actors become the stars. That possibility cinema picks up from a theatre. The next issue is, what does it take from a literature? Now that was the subject of today. What does it take from a literature? It takes from a literature the storytelling tradition. Now the storytelling tradition is much older than the printed word. Printed word is 1,000 years. Storytelling tradition goes much before that in our oral tradition. Now this is the storytelling tradition. I have to spend at least 1 or 2 minutes more on that. As there are students again, Walter Benjamin, one of the cultural theorists, he initially speculated that storytelling tradition has a close affinity with the healing of illness. As most of us we know, when we were children, when we used to get a temperature or thandi, what you say, our grandmother, a mother, she always used to tell us some stories. And that had a healing effect. Subsequently, a grandfather of a literature, Mr. Borges, an Argentine writer, he was a lover of literature. He said, he was very prophetic. He said, when there was a talk on death of a novel, there was a big talk on death of a novel in the Western world. He started saying, no human being will be tired of telling stories and listening stories. For friends, Italian folk tales, the most dominant theme which comes is love. It's like a generic humanity. And if you understand, now when we talk about literature or say now film, what is the dominant value in our films? One more French philosopher, Alain Badiou, one of his lectures in Latin America, he said, I wonder, somewhere in 2003, he said, I wonder whether cinema will do anything other than love. And he further said, for that matter, all of us as human beings will do anything other than love. If you see the war movies, if you see science fiction movies, if you see now current picture, Natsuya Kompasa in Kokni or say Sairat, love is an extremely dominant theme. It's not because the young generation or the old generation likes that. No, it has a generic humanity. It has a universal value, and cinema has picked up that. And where from it has picked? It has picked from not only from literature, but it picked from the oral tradition. It picked it from the folk tales, which came much before the printed word came. There were two masters which came in a world cinema. One is Mizoguchi. He was from Japan, much before Kurosawa. Now Mizoguchi was one of the earliest masters in film. He made extremely beautiful film on love. The name of that film was Crucified Lovers. Simple story. A young girl married for financial reasons to a simple man. Then enter another young man. She falls in love. It was a Middle Ages in Japan. Adultery was punishable by hanging, crucifixion. She ran away with that her lover. And in the last scene of that film, they are taken for a crucifixion. There is a visual image. They are tied back to back on a mule, a kind of horse. They are taken for a crucifixion. They know they are going to be hanged. They don't want to die. But there is an extraordinary smile on the faces of both that young girl and young boy. Now that smile was the power of that particular cinema, which converted that entire cinema into a poetry. There was a second example there was one more masters of world cinema, Rossellini. He made a serious movies, but he made one of the movie on the love, on the theme of love. That was called Journey to Italy. In that film, he showed again a classic subject which is there for films, a troubled marriage. You know, all over the Western world, the divorce rate is very high. There was a troubled marriage, and then the husband and wife, they decide to go to Italy. He was a German filmmaker. There he gives a message that love is not a contract. You cannot negotiate a love and come to a conclusion. But what happens? You have to have some kind of event. And in that particular film, in the last scene, there is some extraordinary event which changes the total relationship between husband and wife. Now there the critics realize that film is the only art which has the capacity to conduct the miracles. Now there is no other art which has this capacity. I'll come to the Indian context now. In Indian context, when we talk about films made on a literature, I call them a literary cinema. Naturally, we start from Satyajit Ray. Now, Satyajit Ray had a different kind of a pedigree. He had a different family background. He was educated in Shantiniketan. He had an influence over world cinema. They had a regular film society in Calcutta. Satyajit Ray made, yes, first the Appu trilogy. Most of you must have seen that. Those 3 films what he made, they were based on Vibhuti Bhushan Bandopadhyay's literary work. These are again based on the adaptations. Then he made Rabindranath Tagore's, based on that, Charulata he made. We go down to the south, because south is extremely strong in that. As Kannada film Ghatashraddha, again based on literary work. And we have got a whole lot of people in a, what you say, Bollywood, the mainstream Hindi cinema, which were making budget films, low budget films. We had Hrishikesh Mukherjee, we have got Guljar, we got Basu Bhattacharya, we got Basu Chatterjee. Basu Chatterjee made Sara Akash on Rajendra Yadav's novel. We have Shyam Benegal, who made significant movies, but he also made Bhumika, which was based on Hamsa Wadkar's Sangte Aika. It was shot here in Madkai. Most of the part was shot in Madkai, in Goa. So we have got n number of examples of the films based on the literature, literary works. Sometimes short story. There was one example in that was extremely serious. That was a Mani Kaul. Mani Kaul made a lot of experimental films. He chose different kind of writers. One of his experimental film was Uski Roti. Now that was based on a short story by Rakesh Mohan. He also made one of the important film, Naukar Ki Kameez by Vinod Kumar Shukla. Now Vinod Kumar Shukla is an extremely creative writer, a living writer in Hindi. My point here is, what these regional films which are based on this kind of a literary works, what was their contribution? Mainly, they brought realism to the film industry. Number one was realism. And secondly, all those films were socially relevant films. If you see Ghatashraddha, if you see Sanskar, these are all socially relevant films. But then, what is the purpose? Does the purpose of a movie or a cinema is only to carry the work of a social reform, or only to make a film socially relevant? Is that the sole purpose of films? I personally feel no, that's an important purpose, but that is not the sole purpose. Film has to go beyond that. Now, how they go beyond that? As I was telling in the beginning, they go beyond by drawing from the 6 other arts, because cinema is a recent entry to the field of art. And there is one small problem for a cinema. Now that problem is, cinema is an extremely expensive art. It needs money. It needs huge money, and it's also a part of a problem. One small thing I'll tell you. In 1983, when a report came on a black money in India, they studied the sources of the black money. Cinema was the 3rd most important source of a black money in India. What was the first? As you know, it was the real estate. Second was the large manufacturing units, and third was the cinema. Now what happens is, that has been happening in a Bombay cinema, the mainstream Bollywood, what you say. It happened in Europe, in Russia, of the collapse of Russia. It's a sort of a thumb kind of a equation. When a bad money starts financing a movie, there is a possibility that movie may be a bad. And therefore, most of the state governments, starting from say West Bengal, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, and now Goa also will start financing filmmaking. Now they will start financing filmmakings in Konkani. Soon it will start. Incidentally, I am looking after this subject, therefore I know the importance. There are certain differences on that particular scheme, but let us not talk that about here. when you talk about regional cinema based on literature, there were some filmmakers who could cross this bridge of just making socially relevant cinema and realistic cinema. I'll give you two examples very briefly. One is Guru Dutt and second is Ritwik Ghatak. Now Guru Dutt and Ritwik Ghatak both are the contemporaries of Satyajit Ray, but the pedigree of Guru Dutt is different. Guru Dutt was working with Navketan Films. He was making thrillers, a crime movie and a comedy. In 1957, somehow he changed his track and he made Paisa. Paisa was not directly based on literary work, but the subject matter was a poet, an unsuccessful poet. And he made such a, it was a melodrama, but it made such a big impact. It was a poetry. And after Paisa, he made a cycle of films. As you know, Kagaz Ke Phool and Saab Bibi and Gulam. Now, these films, he showed the genre of melodrama in such a great way. There was a second filmmaker, Ritwik Ghatak. Ritwik Ghatak had a background. He started making again a cycle of films, which had a background of a Second World War, the Bengal famine, and important is partition. What he used, Ritwik Ghatak, not much from literature. He used from what? He used from a tribal forms, a classical forms, a epic form, a folk form. He drew from that. One of his earliest films, and then the cycle of films, was Meghe Dhaka Tara. Most of you will know that. In a Meghe Dhaka Tara, there is an image of a woman. There is often talk about it, the image of a woman in Indian films. In fact, this year's EP, if you go now in future for an inaugural ceremony, you'll find one kind of a presentation on the role of a woman in Indian films. Now, in that Meghe Dhaka Tara, there is a heroine which is dying now. Now, when she is dying, she says, I want to live. And I want to live with dignity. Now, that image of woman, at least for me, is more important than our mainstream image, what we see in Mother India. And often, by the film critics, Meghe Dhaka Tara's image of a woman is compared to the world cinema. See, there was earlier reference point for that. There's one Karl Dreyer, one filmmaker, who made The Passion of Joan of Arc. And that heroine's image is considered classic, all-time classic for showing suffering. Meghe Dhaka Tara was compared to that. But when did this happen? During their lifetime, neither Guru Dutt, neither Ritwik Ghatak got the recognition from the audience or from the film critics. It's after their death. But that happens in all other forms also. In literature, Franz Kafka did not get a recognition during his lifetime. Vincent van Gogh, a painter, he did not get a recognition. That most of us are aware. There was a third popular example. That is about, I am from a place from Western Maharashtra, place called Kolhapur. We had a filmmaker there, V. Shantaram. Some of you may have heard. The older generation knows that. Now, V. Shantaram started making films little early, 20s and 30s. And that was the time when film became an industry. Now, this is again an important thing. When art becomes an industry, when films become an industry, there are a lot of good and bad things come. He started experimenting with color, he started experimenting with camera, he started making blockbuster films. But we as youngsters, we came after that. I don't remember any of his blockbusters. What I remember is, his bread and butter budget films, which he made in a Prabhat. That was a Prabhat studio in Pune. What was those films? Sant Tukaram, Manus, Shezari. No, and what was the subject of those films? Now those subjects, again like Chaplin, it was dealing with a larger humanity. In fact, Sant Tukaram was also commercially a successful film. But the kind of atmosphere which was happening when film became an industry, these people, they felt, and that was a trap. And their association with the art came down. When we talk about Konkani cinema, yes, we have to draw from the rich Konkani literature. Mahabaleshwar Said is sitting before me. Bhai Mauzo is also here. I mean, I have partly read their literature. There is a huge original writers in Konkani. Yes, we have to also draw from literature, but literature is not the only thing from which Konkani cinema has to draw. You have got a very rich tradition of music in Goa. You have got a very rich tradition of a dance. Now that dance also has a folk element. You have got a very rich tradition of a painting. Now all these traditions, not only which are documented, but the folk part of that also. Filmmaker has to draw, and naturally, without having a consciousness of that, most of the filmmakers, they draw that tradition. And unless you draw that, and unless you synthesize with that, a real product doesn't come. A last thing I want to say, I'll give you an example of a film made on a literary work. The name of the film is Death in Venice. Now, this was made by an Italian film director, Visconti. Now, Death in Venice is a small novel, it's called Novella, by Thomas Mann. The film came in 1971. If you see the film, it's not commercially available. If you see the film, in the beginning shot, there is a character in his latter age. He comes with his luggage to Venice. You know, Venice is the most beautiful place. He comes to the Venice, he takes a boat, and that boat starts moving. That character is facing the audience. Nothing much is told about that character. In the original novella, the character is a writer. Now that writer comes to Venice to die. Here in the adaptation, he has made a composer, he is a music composer. So the boat starts moving from both the sides, you see a beauty of Venice. But what is important there is not the beauty of Venice, not those building structures, that canal. The music starts, the sound starts. And what kind of music he introduced? He introduced a Western classical music. That's called a Mahler's Fifth Symphony. That comes. Now this music transforms the visual image of that character. It totally transforms that image. And that gives a totally melancholy kind of atmosphere. Because his journey is not a journey of a traveler to a Venice. He's going to die in that film. Now that effect is tremendously created there. Now in these kind of films, we don't see anything separately. The audience doesn't see in isolation a kind of a literary work. Yeah, a Thomas Mann's literary work. No. We don't see in isolation a pictorial kind of a sensation. That see how Venice is looking, or how the canals are there. No. We don't see in isolation the music, the Western classic music. No. It's a synthesis of all this. It's a fusion of all this. And it's a fusion of all this that makes a cinema, and that makes a cinema a poetry. And most of the great filmmakers, whatever subject, it's not necessarily a love. This subject pertains to an old man. And if you see the tradition of world cinema, the cinemas made on old people. Say like Desika made a film on Umberto D, a professor, a old man who is dying. There is another filmmaker in Japan, Yasujiro Ozu. He made a classic film called Tokyo Story. Now that is considered the best film of 20th century for last 100 years in Asia. Then we got a Wild Strawberry by Bergman. Now there are well number of examples. All that I am saying is you have to synthesize all these elements of other arts and make a film. And then only a film can become a poet. Thank you.